there are people probably already in the stream who can see this process happening. Hello, people.
And I will also retweet the tweet. And hello, people, as well.
And
All right, the tweet's been retweeted.
wow, so you did it before me. That makes me look pretty bad.
Well, you tagged me in it, so I got a notification.
Okay, excellent. Hey, heroes. Welcome to the Skyjacks Call of the Sky questions and answers stream. I am James D'Amato, which you can see by the little chyron that I've set up for myself. I am very proud of that. I am the host and game master for the Campaign Skyjacks podcast. I hope the audio is coming through loud and clear for this. We're here to talk about the album that just went out to backers today. If you are a fan of Skyjacks and you backed the album and you didn't know, guess what? We delivered the album today. There are still a few things from the Kickstarter that still have to go out, but the album itself, the music that you paid for, is already in your hands. Be sure to check your inbox. If you got the digital edition of the album, you got an email from campaign@oneshotpodcast.com that has a download code and instructions for how to use it with Bandcamp. And if you backed the Captain's edition or anything higher like the Fans edition or Admiral's edition, that is going to be an email coming from James at oneshotpodcast.com. Same deal. You open up that email, it'll have a unique download code for you, and you'll be able to collect your album. But we're not just here to tell you that the album is able to be accessed right now. We're here to talk about it, and I am not going to just bloviate by myself. I have another professional bloviator with me, and that is Arnie Parrott.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hello, James. Hello, Sorted fans. Nice to see you all. Or, you know what I mean.
we get it. We get it.
Yep.
Arnie, do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you and who are you to this project?
My name is Arnie Parrott. I live in Chicago. I live happily in Chicago, and I wrote the music and recorded the music. I did all the music for the album. There are very few parts of it I didn't do. I didn't do the art. I didn't play some of the instruments, but I played most of the instruments. And some other people helped edit some of the words that I wrote because sometimes I write too many lyrics. But I did almost all of it myself.
That's rad. And I guess we should mention the art for the album. The cover art was done by Fiona Shea, who also did the cover photo or I guess podcast album cover for Campaign Skyjacks, however you say that. And there will be a lyric book that is still being worked on, but Justin Langille did interior art for that. And if everything goes according to plan, it's going to be laid out by Jason Robinson. So there's a lot of great collaborators in this project, but the real kingpin is Arnie Parrott. Arnie, you really, every time I came to you with a request for a need that we had narratively for music, you turned around something that was beautiful. Like this whole album is just hit after hit. It's a bunch of bangers. And I kind of wonder, like, is this your first time doing an album? Have you gone through this process before?
Yeah, I guess officially, yeah, this is my first album release. I have been hounded to do an album for many, many, many years and have needed, external stimulus to do it. It's kind of crazy. Like when we released today and I sort of you sent me the message, I got the email from Kickstarter and it's like, it's live. I had this moment of just you don't realize how big of a project something is until it's finished, and then it's not really on your mind anymore. And even though we'd been done with everything for a bit, and even the final push that happened these last few days wasn't stressful. I wrote it. Some of this music I literally wrote 2 years ago. But it's just been sitting I guess, hanging. And as soon as it was released, I had this thing of like, oh my God, like so much weight, so much like not weight that in a bad way, but just like, oh my God, it's done. I could just let it go and let it sit. And then immediately discovered that I'd sent you the wrong MP3 for that one track. So I had to fix it. But I did, but it was, yeah, it's my first album. I could safely say I did not expect to feel this way. And I've left my house once today to get food and Starbucks. And I told every single person I ran into that, hey, I released an album today. And they're like, oh, cool, man. Here's your tea. So they weren't quite as excited for me as I hoped, but I was as excited for myself as about anyone could expect. So
that's so great. So like my experience of you as a performer has always been you performing original music that you were writing. I imagine like at the Renaissance Fair that probably isn't all original. Like you're playing some classics
every now and then. Yeah. But I mean, mostly I play originals at the fair too.
Then why haven't you decided to do an album before?
What a spectacular question. And let me answer your question with a question of my own. Why haven't I done an album? Hey, James, I have absolutely no fucking idea why I haven't done an album. And let me wager a guess. The guess is, firstly, they're very hard to do. Secondly, we had the advantage, or I had the advantage in this case of I wrote these songs, you gave me money for these songs, and that transaction was over. And then by the time we were done with that, we were like, well, actually, we have enough here to do an album. Why don't we release these? So like I already had, like when I wrote the songs for myself, all the expenses of going to the studio, of doing all this stuff, of hiring the musicians, I would have had to take on. And when I wrote all this music that I was doing at the fair, I was like 24 and working at an organic grocery store, making $10 an hour and living literally paycheck to paycheck. And the concept of like having a couple, like even the concept of having enough money to just like sit in a studio for one day and get it all recorded was like beyond me. And then by the time I actually had like the gear and had like the setup that I was like, okay, I could actually do my own stuff here. Then I was being hired by other people to write music. So it was like this weird passing ships where when I had the drive and the will and the want to do my own music, I didn't have the money or the setup to do it. And then when I finally had the money and the setup, I had other people to write for. And so it's like I just missed doing all that other stuff. And I always felt weird because it is one of those things where like every musician dreams of releasing an album. And I never really had that. I was always pretty happy with music just sort of existing where it was. And then when this stuff happened and you'd mentioned early in the process you wanted to do an album, I was actually really excited for that because this stuff is very different from anything else I've written. And I kind of want it to be like, to me, it felt like it should be immortalized, or it should be like put somewhere where people can find it, in case this is these 13 tracks or whatever are the final good things I ever write in my entire life. And now from here on out, we have to have one moment where it's like, okay, he could do it. At one point he had it before the tragic accident where he lost everything. So yeah, I think my answer is I should have, and I didn't release it.
Well, I mean, like, I think there's always all the time in the world. That is pretty much my approach to anything. So I'm glad that you decided to do this now, even if it was us pushing you along. Before we hop into listener questions, one thing that I wanted to talk about just sort of is how this relationship of us working with you as a musician for the show started. And it was, I did a guest spot on a show called Starlight Radio Dreams, which was, I think still is, a podcast in Chicago that is sort of trying to capture the spirit of old-fashioned radio theater. They do sketches and segments that are very much like Abbott and Costello style. It's a variety show.
Serials and the like.
One of the, I think, anchors of that show, and I was able to recognize this right away when I did that first rehearsal, was you and your music. Because there are a lot of shows in Chicago, improv shows mostly, that have, or I mean, that used to, improv is dead.
Yes. It's gone. We don't need it anymore.
That had live musical accompaniment on the stage.
Yeah.
Which I have always been so impressed with improv musicians. For those who are not familiar with improv in Chicago, there is usually a pianist who's got a keyboard who is on the stage with the performers providing live improvised musical underscoring to whatever is happening with the improvisers on the stage. If it sounds like wild, that's because it is, but
It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
it's something that like really evolved to be kind of a form out here. And it's, I think existed like in other forms before, especially as we talk about things like vaudeville and, you know, that initial radio theater style entertainment that Starlight Radio Dreams was sort of trying to recapture. But it is so rare to see somebody with that kind of talent here today. And, you know, you were, for that show, were you writing an original song like basically every week or every performance?
It kind of varied. So my role at that show has changed a fair amount over the years, and I don't remember exactly when you came on, but we were still experimenting with it. And so I was certainly writing every week. I would write a monologue that happened over music. So I wouldn't always write a new song every week. Sometimes I write new music. I would write like, or not every week, every month. It was a monthly show. So every month I would like write something that I would be all my own to put up. Sometimes it was a song, sometimes it was just a monologue. And the thing that, you know, I think to talk about like improv music and sort of where I fall into this category is that I have a degree in theater, but I'm a musician, and I've always loved improv and I've always loved music. And I'm like, I'm not a great improviser and I'm not a great musician, but I'm really good at blending the two. You know, like this is how I feel. Like there's a lot of people who play piano better than me. There's a lot of people who are funnier and better performers than I am, but like there aren't too many people who can take the two skills and styles and blend them together. And that's where I think my strength falls, is that I like storytelling with music, and I like accompanying storytelling, and I like using music as a tool to convey you know, complex storytelling stuff. And so that was what I valued when I learned to do this stuff and what I tried to bring to all the shows. But yeah, so I would write stuff every week, just original things, because it was an outlet, you know, and it was just a creative performance. And if I'm working at a grocery store, obviously I want to have an excuse to just write shit. So I did. Yeah.
So I ran into Arnie at that show, and I am like, if I'm not in my element, I'm like kind of a shy person. So I barely talked to Arnie that first time. I was just like, you know, when we performed together, it's like, oh shit, Professor Pianist, which was his name for Starlight Radio Dreams. Professor Pianist, he's got some talent. He's pretty good. It wasn't till I think the second show that we did alongside Starlight Radio Dreams, which was I think a weird live show. It might have even been for like a podcast festival or something. But we were technically the guests of that performance. One Shot was. And Arnie had put together this kind of beautiful medley about the evolution of like nerd culture. And after the show, that was at the Beat Kitchen.
Beat Kitchen, yeah.
After the show, Arnie had mentioned like, hey, you know, if you ever need someone to do music for your stuff, like that's my job, that you can hire me to do that. And I am a big fan of hiring artists to do things. I love commissioning things. When I go to like a C2E2, my favorite thing to do is walk up and down Artist's Alley and like just commission anything from people. Like I'll drop a couple $100 at a C2E2, just like getting people to draw characters that I like to see and could easily Google photos of at any time if I wanted. But there's something that I enjoy about that. And this job coincides with doing that a lot. Like I have to commission art for podcasts. I have to commission art for merch and whatnot. So like the process of doing that kind of artistic direction and commissioning is just something that I enjoy. So having the ability to commission music was like a little bit of an intoxicating idea. And I eventually decided to take Arnie up on that offer for the Dungeon Dome. I think the Dungeon Dome is the first thing that I actually bought from you.
Yes.
I
did Warda. I did Warda for Ali and Drew.
Yes.
Which before that, I think, but that was through them, not through you.
Exactly. Yeah. Ali and Drew had Warda before they were part of the network. That was something they just did independently. If you have not listened to the Warda podcast or heard the Warda theme, like, please do yourself a favor and check it out. Similarly, if you have not heard the Dungeon Dome theme, I truly, truly love the Dungeon Dome theme. Like
I do too.
I like only heard Arnie as Professor Pianist, but like I came to him with like a request of like, yeah, I want to combine professional wrestling with Dungeons and Dragons, and I want it to feel synthy and dangerous and like fun. And Arnie came back with this wild theme, and I felt kind of after that point, I really want to work with this guy on anything that I can afford the excuse to work with him on. And God, I had like on and off commissioned things, but like really, I think in the last 3 years is when I really started like going to Arnie more and more for stuff. Mm-hmm. And when campaign Star Wars ended, and I was faced with like, well, you have to take one of the most popular shows on the network and somehow replace it without destroying the network. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to need every advantage that I can not to screw this up in some big way. So I reached out to Arnie and I was like, hey, I want to get music from you to use to score this show. I want to kind of have an original score. I was originally going to peel back the curtain super far because Skyjacks is inspired by the music of the Decemberists. I was originally trying to license music from the Decemberists, but like while I was able to get one of their record labels to play ball, whatever company is responsible for holding the lyrics rights to songs, I kept reaching out and starting conversations, and then they would ghost me. And I did that 3 times before. I was like, you're just never going to get these rights. They're never going to understand what a podcast is. And even if you have money, they're not going to take it. So it's like, okay, if that's not going to work, I really do still want music to be a part of this, because I think something about the way the Decemberists take on their subject matter creates a mood. And so I knew that music had to be part of what we're doing, because if you're doing a podcast, audio really is what you got. Like you can present a cover image to, evoke a certain emotion, but after that, like it's what people can hear. And while campaign Star Wars has had a little music throughout the years, I really wanted it to be a much larger piece of this, so we could take more advantage of the whole artistic form of a podcast. And so I approached you and I was like, yeah, I kind of want to do like a Decemberists thing. And I don't know if you remember this, Arnie, but you brought like the most useful like piece of this that I think is really grown to help show the character of what music on the show was. You told me that you wanted the music that you were doing to be as though it came from the world of the show. And that was what Arnie brought to the table. I was picturing originally like, oh yeah, we'll do like rock folk, kind of like the Decemberists. And Arnie's like, well, there are no electric guitars in the setting, so we're just going to do stuff that would actually come from the world. Which kind of, I was like, I didn't know how it was going to work. But the first 3 songs that you delivered to me were Skyjacks, Cutting Stone, and Call of the Sky. And like kind of all at the same time. And as soon as I heard those songs, I was like, oh, shit, this will work. This is going to work really well.
Yeah, it was cool too because like so I knew like I'm just more comfortable writing like that. Like it's so interesting because from my mindset, right? So to be completely honest, when you come to me and like from I was probably nervous and like I'm, you know, terrified of the idea of like we talk about like stepping stones you're taking where like I, you know, have always wanted to write music and I love to do this stuff. And to have someone approach me with a job that to me is like, I don't want to say life changing because it's, you know, it's just, it's not, that's not exactly the scope we're dealing with, but it is like the next step up of being like, okay, this is a serious thing where it's like, you're no longer writing music for this. This is a reoccurring gig and it needs to be like to me it was like this needs to be really good. And so for me to when I'm like bringing up and mentioning the fact that I, you know, I firstly I thought it should be in world because I think it's just a more interesting take, and also I know like I'm going to be better at this than doing a rather than being a layer between the performers in the audience, which is what music tends to be. You know, it's like if there's no fourth wall, if there's like a music is like a screen that it passes through, you know, like the content coming from the stage passes through the screen of music and gets to the audience. Rather than having it be like that, having the music be a character on the stage was something I knew I was going to be much more comfortable with and would enjoy. And also it gives me a lot more freedom because I get to create things within the world and build stuff within your realm without being like, I'm not commenting on anything that's happening. The point is not to be another voice, an outside voice commenting on what's going on the stage. The point is to be creating from that perspective. And so that's what I like to do. So I guided in that direction and asked for that because firstly, I thought it was, you know, like just a little more interesting than what I heard other shows do, and also like I knew that I would nail that better than I would nail, you know, it's more in my wheelhouse to do that than it is to do like a December style folk rock take on what you're doing with it. You know, I just was like, I'd rather do the thing I'm good at because it means I might get hired to keep doing it, and that was like my goal from the start, you know.
And it worked so well. Like the spirit of really any work that I do is collaboration. Like role playing games are collaboration, improv is collaboration. So the idea that like the perspective that you wanted to take is like, hey, I'm not just underscoring. I want to be an active participant in these things. And you know, Arnie's songs and the lyrics in them have created stories and characters and locations within Sphere.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I love that too because I didn't always run stuff by you. There was a point like early on when it was like when we first started, I would like try. I remember trying to be like, okay, I'm making some declarations in this song. Like I'm not just like saying I'm like explaining things that may have to be true in the world. Like remember when I was writing Lighthouse, I just like made up a bunch of terms that I'm like I you know like I think I came up with lumen's eye, or like I came up with some of this stuff that like to me was like these are just phrases people use, and I didn't go like, is this okay? I just like sent it all off and was like, these are now terms. Like this is real, like this is the reality I have made, and I guess you just got to live with it or you got to fire me, take your pick.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, and that I love. Like, I mean, people know from watching me on Skyjacks whenever Johnny will say, let me know if this is okay. Like, I'm obviously going to say yes to that. Yeah. I love that because, you know, it gives me as a performer myself, it gives me more foundation to play off of. Like those songs create such a firm grounding. Like, especially like when I think about something like Call of the Sky and the way it sort of established the relationship between Aaroners and, you know, people on the ground and the various places that they visit. You know, from the beginning, we wanted this show to be an anti-colonial thing. And as somebody who's grown up really with only colonial storytelling, it's kind of difficult to disentangle yourself from that foundation. And, you know, I'll let other people judge how successfully we managed to do it. But one thing that I found extremely helpful was hearing something like Call of the Sky to go, okay, these people and the places they go, they are people who are appreciated, and they are people who appreciate the people of the places that they are visiting. There is a symbiotic relationship here. that, I think defies colonialism in a really nice way. And just that whole dynamic. Also, like, honestly, the way that you approached writing lyrics, there are a lot of, in work songs and sailing songs, you had mentioned, boys is a term that like comes up a fair amount, and you took special care to use gender neutral language in your writing, which, helps so much. It really, really does, to have everybody from all angles trying to go for those goals and introducing things to the world to help it be more authentic to what it wants to be.
Yeah, I think that was another thing. Like I remember you presented that to me in the beginning when we were talking about the way the show was built, and with anti-colonialism, and with the idea of like there being an openness and an acceptance of everybody, which is also, personally, like that's a very easy place for me to write from, because everything I try to write, you try to center on the idea of everyone is important, and that love is like a binding agent for all this stuff. And like when I wrote Call of the Sky, like the idea is that separate from anything else, there are ideals, right? And there's this idea that like that no matter who you are or where you're from, you can feel this thing. And even if there's things keeping you away from it, that's where you want to be. And that's where your direction is. And it doesn't matter, like literally nothing else matters, right? Like race, creed, income, gender, none of it matters. If you feel this call of the sky, you are bonded with the people who do. And I don't want to say you pity those who don't, because that's not correct, but you understand you have it and others don't. And you just accept that and are just like, that's just how it is. I feel this, and I know it might be difficult for others, but I feel this. And yeah, so you were talking about that, and I wanted to make sure that when I wrote these tunes, for the most part, obviously some have specific gendered or other pronouns in them. But I want to make sure that for the most part, the singer felt like it could be anyone listening to the show, right? The idea of them being a specific character or them being a specific human, like Arnie Parrott or whoever, is not what I wanted. I wanted it to be like, this could be almost anyone, with the exception of, I think, like Lighthouse has some specific gender stuff in it and a few other things, but those are more about storytelling and less about like that specific thing.
I think when it is about a specific character, like I appreciate the fact that it moves into that space. And also to peel back the curtain further, Arnie, I don't know if you know this, I have taken it upon myself to write different versions of Lighthouse to pair different genders of individuals, because it's the sort of thing that I figure like is happening in Sphere anyway. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I love that.
And when we put up, which is on the captain's edition of the album right now, June Hemnall and Braith sing a duet of Lighthouse, and I think the roles are flipped in that. So like we did a little bit of adjusting the language there, but yeah,
of course,
just because of the tradition of folk, it's like whatever singer is getting on that stage is going to dictate like kind of the perspective and language and story of that song, because it's the sort of song that some musician in a bar catches someone's eye and is like, well, I'm going to sing this song to impress them, so now I'm singing about you and me, buddy.
Yeah. The idea of they're not, I don't like to think of them as like, I don't think of them as my songs, like it's my voice and hearing them, but like functionally, I love the idea of them living in your world and them being adjustable by whatever needs. And if I'm, currently I'm kind of the person curating all of that, but like that may not always be the case. And then they just, that's like, it just goes elsewhere. I love the idea of other people singing and covering and doing this stuff, and even writing in the same world, in the same style. It would make me very happy to hear.
So with that, I think it's time to answer some questions, because this stream has been up for a little bit and there have been no cues to this Q&A.
Yeah, so far it's just me talking about myself, which is to be expected.
Honestly, great, good. This one comes to us from Emma, and Emma asks, do you have any recurring musical themes throughout the songs which we might not immediately notice? And if so, what do they mean to you? And before you answer that, Arnie, I want to say, if you are someone in the chat who wants to ask us a question live, be sure to @OneShotRPG in the chat so it highlights it in a way, and I'll be able to find it. But yeah, Arnie, go ahead.
Okay, so I've brought examples of this, not of this, but oh my gosh, heavens. But I can talk to this because I wanted to. So when I first started, this is something that I actually kind of, I don't want to say like, this is something I wish I had followed through more on, the idea of there being reoccurring leitmotif and theme. There are small ones, but when I first started writing and when I wrote the first 3 tunes, I had this grand idea for the bridge to Call of the Sky being a separate piece. So the bridge to Call of the Sky is that so let your sails stretch high and the bowsprit lift. Right, that middle section of Call of the Sky is that. And I had that being a individual piece that I called the Skyjacks Prayer. And I wanted that to be like a piece of music that existed in the world that was the Skyjack Prayer. And so when I wrote the first couple tunes, it's in specifically in Cutting Stone. The bridge, the middle of Cutting Stone is the Skyjack Prayer. Hold on. Sorry. Let me get through all this. So this breakdown, this melody right here is bum bum by sail stretch high.
Wow.
And the bowsprit lift. May the deck be dry and your winds be swift. And so it just goes, again, repeats the same motif going through. And so the idea was for that to show up in more places throughout the thing. And I didn't really keep that up with a couple. There's a few moments where I use like the same 3 chords or like the same part of that melody, but it never appears in its entirety again in the whole thing. And I think that was just something that happened where I wrote the first 3 or 4 tunes and then we took a break. Like I think I didn't send more stuff for like at least for like a month. And then like a month later, I wrote a few more and it just like slipped my brain. And it wasn't until like going back and re-listening and realizing, okay, this is what I did. I did this deliberately and I kind of screwed it up and forgot about it. So I mean, I would like to go back to it.
Part of that, yeah, and we can, obviously. We've got all the time and power in the world now.
That's right. Power is what we want.
One of the things, well, power plays into this a lot because one of the issues that we ran into early on with this production is the bet that I was placing on Skyjacks was huge. Because Kat had just exited the network, and the Patreon did not evaporate. It did dip. We did lose patrons, but it didn't disappear. And the investment that I put into Skyjacks of recording the first few episodes, hiring Casey as editor, creating the art for Skyjacks, getting that music for Skyjacks, I was spending thousands of dollars to make this show that I really didn't know if it was going to work out. And, we were also placing a bet of like, hey, we're putting this on the Campaign Star Wars feed, which might give us a shot at retaining the audience, or it might upset everyone who loved Campaign Star Wars. And then everything is gone and the Patreon evaporates and I don't have a job anymore. So the money risk, that I had, the money that I had paid you was like, this is all the money that we can afford. And it got us those 3 songs. And after the first couple episodes of Skyjacks went up and things didn't, like the bottom didn't fall out, it was like, okay, we actually can do this. And that at that point I went back to you for more. So like, if we had the resources that we definitely have now in the beginning, or if we knew we had the stability that we have now, I might have hired you for more songs faster and
right off the top. Yeah.
Things like that recurring theme might have been more present. But I also think that Call of the Sky and Cutting Stone are very related songs. And it strikes me that they're probably from a similar musical tradition, which I kind of think people who know it and get it probably put an allusion to that prayer in their music.
Yeah, and I mean that was just something that I thought was you're right, and they are written from a similar place in the idea of like it's almost like just they're certain they're both very certain about the mindset. Like Cutting Stone is very like we're going off to war, we're going to die, and that's a good thing, and that's fine. You know, like this is just how it goes. And Skyjacks is very like we're 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 doing a very dangerous job. We might not come back. You know, it's the same. That was something once again from day one, something I wanted to emphasize, and something that I love about folk music, and something I love about I think the consistent theme throughout what I've written here is that death should be more present than than it than it is in like our culture and our society. You know, we're so good in modern day of like we prolong it, we don't talk about it. When it does happen, we're very like open, like it's a very I don't want to say we theatrically grieve, but you know, it is like if when a celebrity dies, it's this beloved like the Twitter outburst and like everything like that is I don't want to say unrealistic, but it's just like a big to do, and it doesn't speak to it being a normal thing. You know, it doesn't speak to death being just like a part of the culture. And I wanted to stress when I wrote those first three tunes, which is why the Skyjacks lyrics turned out the way they did too, is this idea that it's a dangerous life and a dangerous world, and dying is part of it. And you just kind of have to accept it. And if you do, you know, your life gets a lot better and a lot easier. And you know, you're calmer. And so I think like the Skyjacks prayer is a symbol of like of that. As I mean, all those pieces are.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next question. This one comes to us from Alfie. Alfie asks, is Otto van von Veen the only cat person on Spear, or are there a whole bunch of furry folk knocking about? I can't answer this question right now, mainly because there are some canon surprises that should be coming your way, not this next arc, but probably the arc afterwards. So I'm gonna leave that to mystery. B, if the typical post-orgy meal in Spear is pizza, what is the typical pre-orgy meal? And
Boy,
I think it's got to be light. You know, it's
yeah.
something light. You want it to be something that settles your stomach, but still allows a lot of physical activity.
Yeah. It's the same thing you would do like before you run a 5K or something, you know. It's
Yeah.
just it's something that's full of good things for your body, but isn't going to weigh you down in case you need to do something pretty athletic.
Yeah. So like if your friend is like attending a potluck and they bring a lot of healthy things, watch out. You
Yeah,
know?
and you never know what it'll be.
Does the jaunty cap stay on during festivities?
How many of these questions are about Otto Van Von Veen? And did I in fact write any other songs, or have I only actually written one song? Because I mean I love yeah, we can I don't know anything else. Otto Van Von Veen is my favorite thing that I've written in a long time. And the reality of that song is that it happened in what 3.5 or 4 hours, because you said, hey, did you write that Cats thing? And I went, fuck, I forgot, give me 1 second. And then I just panic, first idea, best idea, you gave me the name, and I was like, all right, this is the cat that has sex. And then wrote it. It was like everything is pretty much one take, including my ludicrous character voice and vocals. And I was sleep deprived and might have actually had like a drink or two, and I was just like so goofy and loopy because it was the start of quarantine, and I was like just and you remember at the very beginning of this, I personally was like, this is the best thing that could ever happen. I don't have any responsibilities anymore, and fuck it all, I'm just sitting here and doing nothing. And so I wrote that in almost no time at all and released it in even less. And it's just so I know nothing else about Otto Van Von Veen except what is in that verse there. I know nothing else about his. I encourage the community to keep drawing pictures and sending me pictures of what he's like and what it is that he does, because everything I know about him, I have disclosed. There's no more information I have
And
about
I mean,
Otto Van Von Veen.
he's on the crew now, and
He is on the ship, yeah.
One of my biggest regrets, kind of as a performer and artist, is that when we did episode 69 and when we did our post episode 69 spectacular, I didn't remember to bring Arnie on as Otto.
Oh.
Because I had like baritone Barry there, who Tyler and I had kind of talked through, like that is the sexy character that Tyler plays. We had jerk off Jerry there, and we kind of had Gable there to be like the straight person of like dealing with all these big horny personalities, and Otto should have been in there. So like
Definitely.
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it
Yeah.
out.
Oh man, that's great.
Maybe we can do the Otto Van Von Veen like Valentine's Day spectacular or something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he doesn't need a holiday to celebrate. He takes any occasion.
And I definitely approached this the same way whatever executives at NBC were like, David S. Pumpkins can fill an entire special, right? It's like, yeah, if something was successful, why not just keep doing it?
Yeah, that's correct.
The last one is, please tell me the Mariner's real name, please. Oh no.
That's not going to happen.
That's too important. That's got to be discovered in the fiction. I'll go bounce over to a Twitter question. This one comes to us from Bumble. Bumble asks, what was your favorite song of the album? This is to both of us. If you
do you have an answer readily available? You answer.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, Call of the Sky, definitely. It is very close to my heart. It was a song that Arnie dedicated to my late mother. And, you know, it is a beautiful song. It is a song whenever I take time to listen to it, it gives me chills. It makes me think of this thing that I have worked on. One of the cool things about Skyjacks is those bets that I placed on it in the beginning, where I decided to hang this beautiful and weird career that I love on an extremely esoteric idea that my friends and I thought we were having fun with, so everyone else should. Like, that bet worked out. And a lot of that is kind of tied up in Call of the Sky for me. I do love that song deeply and emotionally. The other thing I'll say is Way Hey Ho is just such a fucking jam. I absolutely love that song. So I will go with Call of the Sky for sure, definitely. And because that answer is a little too easy, I'll say Way Hey Ho really rules.
Well, thanks. That's great. I think they've all been my favorite at one point or another. There's no way around that. Like, every time I write something new, like when I wrote every single one of these tunes, it was my new favorite tune. I think when Sam, so getting this album, so once again, peeking behind the curtain, this is the final process of releasing tracks is called mastering. It's like the last thing you do. You almost exclusively do it for albums. Like, you don't usually do it when you're releasing, like I didn't do it on any of these other tracks. Well, I did a little bit, but it's not like much. And it's very hard to describe what mastering actually is, but it's sort of like putting the shine on the car, or like, it's like the last thing you do that just makes everything pop. And you can't really even discern what it is unless you listen to the previous unmastered version. And then Sam Nolte mastered these. She's a wonderful friend of mine. If you listen to them right next to each other, you can hear the differences, and I can hear the differences because I've heard the originals a million times. And when she sent me the mastered tracks, and like the clarity of everything is coming through, and like all the stuff that I'd gotten lost in the mix that I'd written, I think when those got sent to me, the one I listened to Way Hey Ho the most out of all of them. And I think, I don't know exactly what it is about that track. Like, they're all my favorites, but that one is just kind of a little bit more my favorite as of right now. I think that's probably going to change soon, but something about the way it sounded, and like just lyrics aside and everything aside, just the way the track washed over my ears. I think that was the track that I think made me go, yeah, this rocks. It just felt so good and it sounded so good. And like lyrically, I love what that song does, because I think it's it was kind of a tightrope walk to write a song about platitudes and about the idea of, you know, passing on lessons and the importance of of communicating to the younger generation the stuff that's important without sounding like a total old idiot. And I think that lyrically, I really enjoyed writing things that are just like kitschy wisdoms conveyed in a way that makes you go, this actually makes a lot of sense. And I was so nervous that the song would come across as too trite, and I certainly don't think it does. Yeah,
I think you really nail it. One of the things that I like about Way Hey Ho is it's radical too. Like there is, it's like I've seen tyrants, or I've seen tyrants
bargained with madmen who claim to be kings.
That's it, madmen who claim to be kings, and I've seen the destruction their anger can bring. Like it is not just a hey, listen to your elders sort of thing. It's like, hey, I've lived a long life. I'm finishing the journey that you're about to start. Yeah. And these are the things that actually worked for me. That
was the point of the verses, is to say, here's why I'm qualified to tell you these things that you're going to be like, ugh, another person telling me stuff. But I have every piece of evidence to show you why these are the important lessons. And that was, I agree with that.
This is a quick question to you, Arnie. Is Sam on Twitter so we can boost her shit?
Yes, she's also so this is some people ask me all the time about like inspirations for music, and Sam is in a group called Serena, which is a group that travels the Renaissance Festival. 3 women, and they do songs. They're the sirens. They're the Greek myth of the sirens. She is at
they did
Sam
that rad
Nolte
music video, right?
Yes, they did that rad music
Sam
video.
Nolte.
They've done tons of that stuff. She is at Sam Nolte. Yeah. They've done tons of stuff, and there are a few moments of this album that are distinctly Serena in the way they sound. And their influences on these tracks, as well as Sam's influence all over them, because she mastered their tracks as well as my tracks. So,
and that'll be Sam Nolte, SAMNOLTE. So yes. Everyone follow Sam. I deeply appreciate the work that she put in on the album. Like it really does show in those.
Yeah, it sounds so good.
Tracks.
And Serena is her group, which you can look up on Spotify and stuff, and I recommend checking their music out, buying their albums if you like the stream, and see them at your local Renaissance fair if they're there. Yep, sorry.
No, go like when Renaissance fairs are a thing again, please.
Yes,
please go out and see all of these people and bring tips.
Yes, please, we need them.
So this one is a quick one. What character do you relate the most to, or what character do you wish you were more like? I don't know how much. Arnie, do you actually listen to the show?
Great question. My answer is I've listened to the first 12 episodes. Mm-hmm. And then on occasion, Casey will message me and let me know there's a section of the show that he's very proud of, or that he thinks is really cool. Or he'll be like, hey, I used your music like this. And I'm like, okay, I'd love to hear it. And then I'll listen to that episode. And if you ever need a new piece and it has something to do with something I'm not familiar with, I will figure out what episodes I need to listen to. But I haven't listened. I've listened to the first 20 episodes and then intermittent ones throughout. So, but I definitely liked Spit. I liked Spit probably.
That is a question. Will you ever write a song for Spit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What does Spit want to do? Yeah, I'll write Spit. A song.
I could tell you what Spit would want to do, but we would be arrested. We would be put in jail for the rest of our lives.
No, I can write. I would write Spit's favorite song. That's the way it works. I wouldn't write a song for Spit. Right, you wouldn't. I would that's not really how the thing works. But I would write, what song does Spit sing to himself while he's in the whatever he's doing, in the throes of whatever it is.
Really do want the filthy limerick ass tavern song. Sing when it's really late and the head barkeep is gone to bed or whatever, and so
he's got his tune. Yeah, I could do that. That would be fun.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So what characters do I relate the most to, and who do I wish I was more like? I kind of think I definitely relate a lot to Oromar and Margaret and maybe a little bit the broker. The broker in terms of, sometimes I think of myself as like mercenary in business dealings, and you can talk to Johnny and Liz and Tyler about this. When we were talking about contracts a while ago, I was kind of explaining to them why they needed to include certain provisions in the contract, that like why we shouldn't always assume that I have their best interests at heart and we needed the contract to have their best interests at heart. And they were like, when you were explaining those things, you sounded like the broker. You had like slipped into their voice. So like, yeah, I definitely think about that in business dealings. But Oromar is like kind of a diehard romantic and idealist who really wants to trust people and for them to do their best, and believes that if you do the right things, they will work out the right way. And, he's dead. So, like, you can see where that gets you, but, like, he is the type of person that, I wish people were, and he's like the hero of my most naive dreams. So I definitely relate to that. And Margaret is really good at communicating with people, and there are definitely aspects of Margaret that I wish I had more of, but I really, really relate to the idea of prioritizing other people and like doing your best to help them with what capabilities you have. And Margaret, certainly more capable than me. So let's go to this question from Anti-Chris Vero. Do either James or Arnie have any favorite IRL shanties? And did you draw from any shanties as inspiration?
Yeah, I've worked at Renaissance fairs for many, many years. Every single song on here is derived from that experience, whether it's songs written for the Renaissance Fair by bands on the Ren Fair circuit, or whether it's by songs that are just played there that are like Irish traditional jigs and reels, or like are like what gets played there. Songs I like a lot. There's a song called, it's an old spiritual that has been co-opted by the Renaissance Fair. There's a song called Roll the Old Chariot, and there's a song, what is it called? A Drop of Nelson's Blood. That sort of, they are both very similar feels. I like those. I like. There's a song called, what is it? It's called. I can sing it. It goes. Singing over, hey, in a talent ship with a fair and a favoring breeze, with a goodly crew and a captain too. What is this called? Carry me over the seas. I think it's called 1,000 Miles Away. I don't know what it's called, but that one that I just sang is another one of my favorite ones. And I don't know. I mean, I like a lot of them. I love shanty sings. I mean, I listen to them whenever I can. And I love that shanty singing is its own art form. That's something some people are really good at, and it's pretty cool.
I was just looking through, trying to find mine. I mean, so like the things that I would consider shanties, like a lot of them are obviously Decemberist songs. Ones that I'm pretty sure Barge Ballad, that I heard first by The Longest Johns is a shanty. It is like a song about people working on a riverboat and kind of how they are depending on young members of the crew to do their jobs and keep everyone alive, and how like you can't criticize that young man because you need him, is kind of like the general theme of the song. And I liked that. I like that a lot. I'm going to have to now scroll through all of my Decemberist music to find the ones that I really like as shanties. I consider... Nope, that's not it. Rocks in the Box. Rocks in the Box is a great, like, classic Decemberist shanty. It is all about, hey, don't fuck up. Do your job and don't fuck up or you're going to die.
Yeah.
I really love it. It's super classic. It has the exact attitude that you want for a sea shanty. So definitely love that. Arnie, how did you get involved at Ren Faires?
Oh man. In 2008, I was attending the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, which is in the very center of Wisconsin. And my buddy James, Jimmy Freer, who now is in an acrobat troupe, or he's just freshly retired from an acrobat troupe called Barely Balanced. He had gotten a job at the Renaissance Fair the year before, and he got me and just like every other person who we all hung out with. We were in an improv group. He was like, "You're gonna love this. Come on down. We're gonna do this audition." I went down to Milwaukee, I think, and we did like a general audition for the artistic director there, and they hired us. And then for practically no money, I drove 3.5 hours every weekend to put on a silly costume and to pretend to be an Elizabethan spy for 9 weeks. And it was simultaneously this is what I love about being young and dumb, is like, now I would never make such an insane decision. Just on paper, the worst choice you could ever have made. I had no money and I lost all of it. And I spent like so much of my impoverished time just like not doing a real job and just like sort of having fun in the woods. And now adult me would be like, what a terrible idea. But 20-year-old me, and I'm so grateful that I was so susceptible to the peer pressure, because like it was the best choice I ever made. I had such a great summer. It was so fun. It was surreal. I was like drunk most of the time. You're 20 and it's just what you do. And I just like truly, it opened my eyes to so much stuff about like, just like I felt like I learned more in 2 months than about myself and about like history and about like performance than I had like in a long time. And then I kept doing it over the years. And obviously like the first year or two that you do that stuff is the most, when you're the greenest and the most excited, those are sort of the memorable ones. But I haven't stopped doing it. I still love it. I just don't have that same youthful, like, oh my God, this is the best year of my life. Like that doesn't, I've grown more mature since then, but I still love doing it. It's just now my perspective on it is very different.
Are bad now.
Yeah, and we're on the way out, and this is the end. We've turned it over to the next generation before we die.
It doesn't matter what we were doing when we were 20. We were 20 when we were doing it, so we remember it fondly.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. So yeah, that's how I got started doing it. It was just through a general audition in Milwaukee.
This next two questions I'm going to ask, I think, work as a pair.
Excellent.
This first one comes to us from Connor, and Connor asks, can you speak more to the introduction of the fiddle to a handful of tracks that were remastered from the tracks that first appeared on the show, like Way Hey Ho? And it dovetails, I think, nicely with which song changed the most from its first version to the one that eventually made it to the album/show.
Well, okay. Well, the fiddle question is easier to answer because there's a series of concrete answers. Firstly, I do not play the fiddle. Every instrument you hear on the like original tracks that are in the show are instruments I can fake, and I fake that through using MIDI patches I record into a program called Ableton, and I have keyboards next to me that have the capabilities to make a lot of sounds. Fiddle is an impossible sound, not impossible, but expensive sound to replicate. The violin it's a brilliant instrument, but it can't be like, it's a lead instrument, and to have it be, it's like a trumpet, to have it be digitally replicated, incredibly difficult, and would require an enormous, like, I don't have the patches or plugins for that. So for all these tracks, I wanted fiddle on them. Firstly, because it's the best possible sound for this kind of music. It evokes exactly what you want. The fiddle can either be like slapping your knees, like it's used in Toast the Axle, this like merry, like dancing around fiddle sound, but it's also like such a melancholic instrument that it can be so, the tone can be so beautiful or like resilient. I think it has so much capability. And so I knew I wanted to use fiddle in all of these tracks. Then when we were planning the album and putting everything together, this global pandemic happened, and all of my friends who were Renaissance Fair musicians fell out of work, right? We all lost our jobs in almost no time at all. And I still had income from writing and working for this stuff. So for every track, almost every track, I tried, where I needed a musician, I tried to hire a different musician from the fair circuit who I worked with in the past and wanted to give James his money to. And so I hired, I think I've hired 3 total fiddlers. I have a 4th who I'm planning on working with for the different tracks to play solos on that, because it filled the needs of, I wanted it to be every track. I wanted to have a real violin or fiddle, and I wanted it to be front and center. I didn't want it to sound fake, and I wanted to give money to the people who needed it. So it was like a perfect storm of that coming together. So in the original drafts that don't have fiddle, those are incomplete deliberately. Like they were just, I didn't like spur of the moment decide that's what I wanted. It was left out in the hopes that I would be able to hire the people I wanted to play it. And then in terms of how the tracks evolved from beginning to end, that is something I'm very proud of. I have a pretty good hit rate with this stuff. Almost nothing. My first drafts of almost all these are what we used. Some of them were not complete, but I think the general score of how it was, everything started pretty much where it ended. There wasn't a huge difference. I think the most jarring one for James, and we can talk about this too, is when I did hire the fiddle player for Way Hey Ho, and I guess for months I released the new version of it, put it in our shared folder, and then just told nobody. And so I guess for a long time it sat there, and then James was like, "Oh, got the new version of Way Hey Ho," and I'm like, "What? That's been done for months." And he's like, "Violin, it sounds so good." I'm like, "Oh no, I screwed up so bad. You had this available to you this whole time, and you've just been using the old version that kind of like sounds good, but yeah, it was very funny."
I think it is a really funny difference, which now on, if you are a fan who's got the Captain's edition of the album, you can go and listen. The show version of Way Hey Ho is a part of that album. You can listen to it with the fiddle and without the fiddle. I think it is a useful thing to have for scoring, like the contrast between those two. And I think Allie makes good use of it for sure. But it is very, very funny how long, like I kind of felt bad because on our end, I usually assume when an artist presents a thing to me, especially if it is changed from a previous thing they've presented, that like, hey, this is the version that I'm more confident about. This is what I want people to see. And like we had been using kind of what
demo
could be looked at. Yeah, exactly. A demo as the thing that is the version that most people recognize. And I do like that that you can hear the fiddle version, the album version now, and you can hear like how catchy and kind of sweeping it is. I think it makes a dramatic different presentation from what we were doing with the original Way Hey Ho. I'm glad both versions are out there, because some nights you go out to the tavern and the fiddle player has a fever, and so you play the songs anyway. And they still run.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
This one comes to us from Pirate Queen Morgan. For those of us that are musically inclined, do you have any tips for writing our own folk songs? Both general songs and specific songs for Sphere. Ooh.
Oh, great question. So I think the best part about folk music is that it can come from almost anywhere and from almost anyone, right? There's no, the image of a folk singer, you look at like Woody Guthrie, or you look at like Bob Dylan, who isn't even maybe that folky, but has like folk elements to it. You don't have to be a great player. You don't have to be a great singer. You don't even have to have an especially like good, you don't need to be like an expert of the English language or anything like that. You just have to have a perspective that resonates with people at the right time, right? And so a lot of good folk is just people telling the truth, and that's it. So like I call it the gift of honesty, and certain writers just have this ability to just like take a take a topic that you think is dear to you, right? Like, so for me, if I'm writing, when I'm writing Call of the Sky, I'm not, I'm writing partially about leaving and coming back, but in my head I'm writing about the fact that there are always things I want to do. And sometimes those things, whether it's like writing music or whether it's performing at a Renaissance fair or, whatever it is, everything that I try to pursue that is my own interest does pull me farther away from other interests that I have other people and other things in. And that's just a reality of it. That's just, we don't have enough time to like do everything we want. And you have to make these choices at a certain point. But when you know what you want, you have to do it. And so you find sort of that thing that is to you important, whether it's if you want to fall in love, write about wanting to fall in love. If you want to go travel, write about wanting to go travel. If you want to write about how every politician is an idiot, you write about that. You find your core truth and you write about it, and you don't need to do much else. You get a guitar, you get whatever instruments you're comfortable with. You can do it with a voice and a drum, and you just tell the truth, and you do it in rhythm to music. And that's folk, really, I think.
And as far as writing for Sphere,
Oh
Sphere
yeah.
has kind of the advantage of there are so many different places and people and cultures in Sphere. And music is a major form of communication. And one of the cool things about Skyships is that, there were all these disparate places that had, kind of for the past 200 years been isolated from each other. And Skyships break that isolation, and it becomes necessary in a way to write from the perspective of your home so that you can explain yourself to people and kind of be understood and make your perspective understood. And I think a lot of that is carried in some of those tunes. Like Cutting Stone, for example, like, hey, you're on this ship now and we might have to fight and we might have to die. And
Yeah.
you got to believe in those things because they're realities that we carry with us every day. Like that is big. And, Call of the Sky, here's to the strangers who've ever been kind. It's like, we depend on people being kind to us. And there's a reciprocity there. And there's also like kind of a sadness that you're explaining to people who look at you and want your job or want to come with you. At the same time, it's introducing this romance, it's introducing this melancholy. When I think of perspectives on Sphere and like kind of how folk traditions evolve, and when I think a lot about variants of the songs that we hear on the show, how they change from place to place, how they change from performer to performer, because folk music kind of gets passed around. And just like myths or stories, there are 1,000 different ways to tell a story. Even if it is the same story, there are 1,000 different ways to play a song. And so that kind of thing, almost sort of like the luminaries, in that there's no concrete way to define them, and they kind of change based on your perspective and based on the individual luminary and whatnot. It's all an expression of that. So my advice, if you want to write for Sphere, think about where that person might come from and what kind of life they might have led.
And as like if you finding like your own perspective to speak from is difficult, and I know how that is because I've struggled with this too, it's so easy for an artist to be like, does what I say have value, and like this discussion of like, we all get that. Like, I would encourage you to take, I mean, if you're having a hard time taking that first step, take one of the tunes that I've written and just use, like James said, write a new verse, rather than if writing a whole song seems like too much, because it can be, it's a crazy thing to do. Everyone has my permission to just like take a song and be like, I don't know what to write about, so I'd like to write about leaving home. I'm going to write a verse to Call the Sky. Or, I'd like to write about fighting. I'm going to write a thing to Cutting Stone. Like everyone has permission to take those and record those and like tag me in them. I don't hold, I mean, I don't exactly know how copyrights work, but like in terms of, as far as I'm concerned, like if you're just posting stuff, I'll listen to it and I'll enjoy it. You're free to do that.
This one comes to us from Joe, who helps manage the studio and really,
thank you, Joe,
builds our tech empire. Joe asks, when can I just drag Arnie into the studio and use all the new cool shiny stuff to record with him?
Immediately, whenever you want. I do nothing. I released an album this week. I'm taking the week off. Whenever, Joe. Just you've got my info. Send me a message. I want to try it all out.
I mean, that studio is mostly not in use now because of COVID things. So as long as both of you have quarantined appropriately and are comfortable being around each other, I would love to hear anything that comes out of there.
Yeah, totally.
Let's see. This one comes to us from Wizards Baker. I listen to Skyjacks on Spotify. How do y'all feel about Spotify doing podcast subscriptions alongside their normal music subscriptions? Are y'all getting any of that if it happens? I mean, this is easy to answer. No, Spotify pays us nothing. I feel a couple different ways about Spotify. We are on Spotify. We had to voluntarily submit to Spotify, and of course I decided to do that. The reason is, we need to be in as many places as possible to capture our audience. Spotify, unlike every other podcatching service, downloads one download of your audio from your RSS feed, then puts it into their architecture, and listeners stream from that. So they don't give accurate data back to me at Simplecast, which is the audio tracker that I use. Spotify does have a separate login that I can go into. So to really get a true idea of our numbers, I have to log into Spotify. It's a little bit of homework. It's a little bit annoying. The cool thing that Spotify does is it gives us a lot more data on our listeners, which is not cool from like a normal perspective, but pretty much in every other form of entertainment media, the people making the content that you listen to or watch or whatever know so much more about their audience than podcasters do, because Apple built the original podcast architecture and did not build in any way to get advertising data. So even though we could potentially have unprecedented amounts of information about who's listening to our shows, how far into our shows different people listen, all sorts of stuff, that like the original podcatchers weren't developed to take on that kind of data. And it's been updated, but it's not been updated robustly. And part of the reason is Apple doesn't make any money from that. Spotify, because its architecture was developed for music, it has a really robust algorithm to analyze that different information, which means when we are trying to make ourselves appealing to advertisers, we can actually use some of that information. I can go, yeah, my listeners are 3% self-identified non-binary. So if I'm like trying to pick up a clothing manufacturer that specifically wants to market to non-binary people, I can go, hey, we've got this many people in our audience who I identify as non-binary. So it's useful, but really only in the kind of gross and mercenary end of the business. Spotify sucks. There's a reason that the album isn't on Spotify, is because we would not make any money from it. And it was important to me that Arnie be paid well and that the network receive money from this, because we can use this network. We can use this like nest egg that we've got from the album to turn around and, get a bunch more music from Arnie. And instead of getting it piecemeal over the course of 2 years, we can actually get a lot more money right away, so Arnie can afford to focus on things and whatnot. And like it is so much better, I think, to hire someone to do a whole job instead of doing it in bits and pieces. Oftentimes, with the amount of money that the network makes, we can only ever afford bits and pieces. So, getting a huge payday like this means a substantial difference to the art that we create. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Spotify. Like, I need Spotify because I don't get that data anywhere else. But do I like the fact that Spotify just profits from my stuff? No, I don't. Fucking Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
This one is a follow-up to that question, so I'll just answer it very quickly. Follow-up, but feel free to skip. Is there another podcast app I should use to help support y'all? If so, what do you recommend? It doesn't matter where you listen to us. It really doesn't. If you listen on Spotify, continue to listen on Spotify, especially if you're already paying for the Spotify subscription. Like, I listen to The Besties on Spotify because it is a Spotify exclusive podcast. But it's also easy, and it is a newer podcatching service than the other ones, which means it has some features that are more convenient to listeners. I listen on an ancient podcast app, so it's probably better. Just listen wherever. Do not feel moralistic about that. Instead, levy your representatives to start going after companies like Facebook and Amazon for antitrust laws, because they should have done that a long time ago. Anyway, let's answer some more questions about this album, though.
We can shit on capitalism if you want. I'm fine with that.
Asking for a bill buddy, but what were Arnie's favorite verses that didn't quite fit the theme? Or what were some of the themes of his runner-up favorites?
Oh, for the fan verses. I think that's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so man, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I don't know, like the reason I picked the verses that I picked was, in the end, I sorted it down to about 10 finalists, and they all could have gone into the song with no problem. The reason I picked the ones I picked was because people wrote about themes that blended together. And this was something that I didn't think about when I was doing this contest, was that the advantage I had as being one person writing everything was that the verses all had sort of an arc and a theme, and they aren't supposed to be taken individually, even though they can be. And the ones I ended up choosing, I was like, this has a mini storyline that is cohesive to me. And these 4 verses and the bridge and the chorus all blend in such a way that that I think make the song feel like a whole song instead of just like 4 submitted verses. The themes universally across the board for all like 60 or however many verses I looked through, everyone nailed themes so well. I was so thrilled. There were verses about specific to Sphere Skyjack things. There were verses that are dedicated. People sent me messages about their own lives and being like, I'm writing this because this is where I am as a person, and reading their verse on top of like the history of them as a person. It's just like so beautiful. People writing about wanting to, escape from to get out of a small town. People were writing about there was a verse about someone trying to, I thought it was really funny. Someone wrote a verse about leaving a small town, and someone else wrote about moving to a small town from the city. I was like, this is, people can take the same message and twist it to, make it opposite things. There were a lot of verses about leaving specific loved ones that I thought were really gorgeous. That was something that I enjoyed too. I don't know. I think thematically, everyone nailed the voice so well that it's hard to pick like a favorite thing someone wrote about. The verses that I picked were twofold. Firstly, like I said, they all blended together really nicely, which was important to me. And also like they used the language in a really good way. Like the words aesthetically felt good. but thematically, I think there were no misses. You know, I could have released a 60 verse version of Call of the Sky, and I'm sure you guys would have listened to it, but it would have been very hard for me to do. But very difficult to reformat a 4-verse song to be for 60 verses. Not to mention, I'm not sure my computer has the RAM nor hard drive to hold that.
There is a part of me that does want that song just because, like, people know that I am a big fan of Patrick Rothfuss. And one of the things that I love about the way he writes about Temerant and music in Temerant is he has a very clear idea of what the tavern music scene is in that world, and how everybody, like, there are a dozen different, or, you know, hundreds of verses to Tinker Tanner, and they vary by region and audience and all these things, and you could be singing Tinker Tanner conceivably for hours as a collective bar. Call of the Sky, in my mind, works the same way, in that, you know, people around the bar are generally kind of keeping a tune together, and different people will hop up with their verses throughout the night. So, like, a 60 verse version of that song that happened in an evening in a bar somewhere, you know, on Sphere, which I kind of love. I wouldn't force Arnie to do that unless we were going to be able to pay him a substantial amount of money.
Say, you could force me if you were flushed with cash. I would happily be forced in that instance, but yeah, I would like to do it. That would be fun.
Yeah, so I guess give us more money and we'll see. This one comes to us from Joel. Joel asks, is the narrator of the track Skyjacks an in-universe character? That song kicked my heart down the stairs in a good way, and I want to know more about them.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that everyone I wrote is in universe. I think we talked about that at the start of the stream. But if you're just joining, everything, whether James likes it or not, everything I write is canon. And it just has to sort of be like that. Yeah, I do think the character in Skyjacks is in universe. I mean, I think they also represent, you know, anyone who set out to be an Aaroner. I think they're sort of in place. And like I said, this is in the first 3 I wrote. And like I said, the emphasis on the danger of the job is what I really wanted to sort of convey. And so I wrote the first, this is the final song I finished. Like, this was incomplete up until a week ago.
Yep.
Because
much to my stress.
Yes, I'm sorry. But the complexity of trying to write these verses, and about like I knew I wanted to tackle death, and I knew I wanted everyone except the lead singer to die, but I also didn't want it to be cruel, and I didn't want it to be, you know, there was a lot to balance, and I was having a difficult time writing it. And I think I did a pretty good job in the end of getting where I wanted it. But it is, you know, I wanted I wanted to convey the idea that sacrifice is required to do this, and that once you get to it, you know, the line I wrote was, they ask me what I wish for, and I truly do not know. Is the line the character says, and the idea being the logical thing he would wish for is his friends back, right? Like, that would be like what a normal person would wish for, but this person doesn't think that. And that's kind of I think that's an interesting thing of the idea of, was so in their brain, this was worth it, right? In their brain, losing their 3 closest friends to become a sky pirate was worth it. And like, that's not a relatable thing for me, you know? And I think, like, for a lot of people, like, losing 3 people you're close to just to get the job you want doesn't necessarily make sense. But it was important for me, this idea that this is what happens, and this is sort of the world here is not crueler, but like, there is sort of a, like, once again, death isn't that big of a deal here. It still sucks, but it's not, you know, like, it's a present and accepted. And especially like the idea that these people set out and everyone told them, you're going to die, and it came true. They did, you know, but for our singer, that was the right call. So I don't know.
This is the most critical thing I think I will ever be bothered to say about Arnie Parrott. I do think there is another verse to that song that sort of, because we learned about the journey and death of this person's friends, that narrator's friends. We don't know really what became of the narrator, which makes me think there is either a verse that goes after the one that we hear on the end of the album, or between that verse and the very end verse and the rest of the song, that sort of like, I became the captain of a sky ship and like I saw many places or whatever. Like I think there is another verse, but also it is very appropriate, especially because of where we are in the story, that it goes the way it does right now. Like,
yeah, and see, I think to some extent I agree with you, but I think to another extent I completely disagree. But I love the idea that what happens to the character isn't important, right? Like I think we want that, and I really do think that obviously we want to know who this person became, and I think that's a story worth exploring. But I think the song isn't about that. The song is about how they got to this position and how they got to this job that they have, and then what they did from there is separate from this. Like it's two separate worlds for them. You know, they had their pre-Sky Pirate world, which is what this song is about, and then from there on out, the greatnesses they achieved, or if they just get thrown off the ship in the first week, you know, like that all is up in the air. And I think that's a story anyone could tell, and I think it could be told by a separate song, like a sister song would be totally cool. The idea, maybe, you know, maybe when I write, when we work on the next themes, you know, like in the next show, maybe the next Skyjack theme will be the continuation of this person's story. You know, that's conceivable to me.
I would be very interested to see if that person is like some kind of legendary captain within the canon and whatnot. Yeah. But you know, this I think very clearly displays the differences between Arnie and I as artists. And if you look at my work, I think it's very clear that I just shout all the themes very loud all the time, and Arnie leaves room for subtlety. And, you know, I think it was Stephen Colbert who said subtlety is for cowards.
Yes, that's correct. And I am happy to be a coward. Thrilled to be a coward.
Yeah. No, I will say Arnie, in all of any disagreement, Arnie is right. And my perspective is, generally speaking, a Hollywood perspective of, well, let's just explain everything. Which is not necessarily
totally legit. Totally fair.
Artistic thing. These are two easy questions. This one is, we know from Last Breath that Lighthouse is a diegetic real song within the universe. Are all the songs in the albums the same? Yes. That if that was not clear, I do want to make it very clear, because I think it's one of the more impressive things that Arnie pulled off, and a huge contribution that he made to the show and universe. There's a corollary to that, but I will answer this other question first. So where can I buy this album? This album will be out next Wednesday. Next Wednesday is the 25th of November. It's going to be available both on Bandcamp and itch.io. So get ready to check it out there. The corollary here is, what other genres of music are on Sphere? One that I can confirm right now, because we're gonna hear it in future arcs, and I'm going to be putting my foot down and demanding that more of it appear next arc, is hip hop. Specifically hip hop based on beatboxing and ham boning, and like anything that you could do to create the sounds that exist, that we are used to in hip hop, with whatever music they have available to them in Sphere. One of the things that James Mendez Hodes like built into the Liquid Swords Monastery is that poetry is important to them, but poetry to the Liquid Swords is rhythm and poetry. So it is fucking rap battles and really rad MC stuff that I really want this blend of folk music and hip hop to become a big part of the world. I'm forcing the issue by the next location that we're at.
And happily accept it. I'm very excited for that.
Arnie's good for that and has known that it's coming. But
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about that.
but Arnie, I'm curious. Are there any other things that you would like to or plan to explore? Because we've talked a little bit about like the next songs that we want to work on and what the show needs next.
Yeah. So I think in terms of other genres that exist, I'd like there to be sort of all the things that evolved from sailing songs, and like so this is something that's really interesting, right? Like I'd like there to be sort of a blues element, and I'd like there to be an existing and I think that goes hand in hand with hip hop as well. This idea that, because a lot of like folk and like sailing songs and these like evolutions of music, like blues and like working music directly comes from tracks that are both like European centric and like African and Southern, and Asian, like these influences all tie together to make blues and to make like even bluegrass, like these tunes that sort of all these genres that all evolved relatively simultaneously. I like that idea. Mostly what I want to explore is I mean, where something I'm looking into, because we've talked about this too, is finding people who write in the folk genres that I'm not comfortable writing in. Like I write a very Western centric folk feel, and that's, to be fair, what I know and what the Decemberists are. And so that's true. But I would love to tackle like I love, like, Middle Eastern folk music is so cool and so interesting to me, and the complexities of the drums and like the doumbek and like all the it's belly dancing music, like it's what we would know it as, but like it's so much more than that. And like I just don't have the cultural perspective to speak on it, nor the education to know anything about it. So I would love to explore in the future Eastern folk and like pushing east of Scandinavia, which is what I know, and into into that realm, because it's very percussive and very emotional and very cool.
And that is like that is more of what I want from Sphere too. Like one of the things that I talked to Arnie about is that yes, he is definitely going to be the musician that I go to a lot as we develop music, but I also am kind of going to be shifting him a little bit into a music director role as we develop the show more and more, so that we can get access to those influences for the show. Because like I said from the beginning, I don't want the world of Sphere to feel like it is a Eurocentric world. I think if you look at a lot of fantasy, all of it looks like the same kind of European fantasy. There are very, very few fantasy things that we get to see in big media. Like obviously there are so many fantastically talented, marginalized authors who are writing outside of that scope. But like when you go to Hollywood and ask them for fantasy, they give you the same vaguely medieval fantasy that looks like it's happening somewhere in Northern Europe over and over. And I do not want that to happen to Sphere. So one of the things that we have to do that is I need somebody who understands music to like help put that together and manage that. And that's one of the things that I'm leaning on Arnie for. Like the next location that we're in, I'm going to also need music that is inspired a little bit by capoeira, specifically using that 3-count stringed instrument, which I cannot remember off the top of my head. I need that influence, and Arnie, I'm sure, will be able to help me find somebody who can get that influence in and put that into the music and make it work really well and show off a Sphere that is not so white seeming. Because We went to Bougeneath, which was, that is it was combining a Welsh word with a Polish word, so it's very, very white. And even though it had like a little bit of a New Orleans inspiration to it, it's still kind of a white place. And I had planned to break from like the pattern of Wolf's Tooth, Shankill, and Bougeneath. But I asked Tyler, I asked one of the players to name the next place that we were going to, and that was Nordia. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of has to be Scandinavian. I don't think there's
Who lives there?
I don't think we can get away with not making that Scandinavian. But like the next place that we are going to was a place that was developed by one of our freelancers. I'm so excited about it, and I'm excited for the music to reflect that as well.
Yeah. It'd be cool.
This question is, can you speculate how Nordia changed their particularly musically culture changed thanks to the impact of the Uhuru? It's hard for me to speculate a little bit on that. I will say I think there are a couple songs that are going to be coming out of Nordia trying to explain what happened there. There will be many different folk songs about how Oromar Vale crossed blades with the Mariner and drove him away. There will probably be a version of some new verses for Toast the Axle about how the Mariner didn't drink his wine and got banished from the town.
Gotta drink the wine, Mariner.
You gotta. You're gonna end up like
drink
Casey.
The wine, Mariner. God, you don't want to be like Casey.
And there
lecherous
are
thief.
Probably also going to be songs about Jonnet. Like one of the things about music and folk tales and whatnot is people are trying to talk about things that happened and express the emotions of those things that happened. Like in order to explain to their children that the town was almost destroyed by the Mariner and the crew of the Uhuru saved them. Like that is going to end up as a song. That is going to end up as a story. And like Jonnet's interaction with that whole community is going to be mythologized like several times over. And if the truth about Gable ever gets out to a wider audience, like the fact that Gable appeared in Nordia is going to be memorialized in music as well. This is not a question that somebody sent to us, but they just said, I can't deal with Toast the Axle. It's so fast. How?
I think I slowed it down. I think my original track was faster.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to listen to Arnie's Adler's $100 video.
Oh, Adler Fi's $100 giveaway. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
those
the fast
songs are
one.
fast.
And the best part is, so I was originally, not to deviate to this, but with those, you can digitally speed up music pretty well, but digitally speeding up vocals is awful. So when it had to get faster and faster, you just have to do it. You can't like alter it. And so it's just like, we're just going as fast as I can. And that's something I'm fine with personally, but I do think it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Wizards Baker asks, will there ever be folk punk thrown in at some point? Washboards, tub, bass, uke, banjo. Yeah, of course. I really would love to get some banjo in there. And also,
well, I was thinking about the idea of, so I want to do. I was thinking about this with the answer to the other genres. Is I love like Tom Waits, and I love the idea of there being like the sphere equivalent of creepy circus music, which is just like, this Tom Waits like I got the hands of a blind man, like this guy who's been smoking for a million years, singing these songs, like rasping through these songs about just really weird, ambiguous poetry that's pretty beautiful. I would love that. Yeah.
Oh, that would be so good. Well, I mean, banjo is going to have to come into play in the next arc because this is like a little bit of a half spoilers things. We're going to a place called Ungoni, and it was named after like a instrument that was kind of the proto banjo. It is like the ancient ancestor of the banjo. So banjos are going to have to show up in there. So
Great.
I am very, very excited about that. I really got to write up those descriptions to you, Arnie, because we
Yeah, please.
we
This
should
is all
get to
news
work
to me,
on
and I'm
this.
excited to hear it. Honestly.
It's going to be this arc is going to be very good. Answering other questions. Does this comes to us from Gavin Kimi? Does composing songs that are in-world artifacts pose any unique challenges, be it for lyrics, instrument selection, or style?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It does, but so I feel like this is going to tie into a rant about creativity. I feel like people categorize creativity incorrectly. I don't think it's so much as like coming up with crazy wacky ideas. You know, that's kind of this weird idea of it. Creativity at its best, I think, is taking contrasting and like all the information you have available and distilling it down into the one tiny little crystal that is the product you finally release. And so the challenges offered by composing in a world actually, I think, add refracting elements, which make it, if anything, almost easier to compose for. And so in writing for Sphere, like I said, we've talked a little bit about, you know, I wanted to write from an equality perspective and like an egalitarian perspective and like from a place of love. And so not to mention just using the things that exist in the world without, you know, I'm absolutely fine just naming things, you know, the Waystone Bar in Kent and coming up with all these like, you know, the Widow Hills or whatever, or the Hollow Hills and the Widow's Walk, like all this stuff that I came up with that's just sort of in universe. But I don't want to ever tread onto the toes of like, I want to give you periphery that you can maybe use, but I don't necessarily want to be like, okay, now I'm going to pick a city that James has named, find the people in there, and write about that. You know, with the exception of the Bognalia tune, which was very, very fun. But I think the hardest part about it is, and this I talked about this with writing in the Rothfuss world too, is that the things you take for granted that may not necessarily be true in this world. Like I don't think this has happened with Sphere yet, but the idea of when I was writing the song in the Rothfuss world, when I was writing what's it called?
Miss Darvin Scutton.
It's Darvin Scutton. I like original verse had the word like 2 weeks, but weeks don't exist. You know, like I can't say
weeks do
weeks.
exist. They're not as popular as spans.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, like, it's like less. So there's all this stuff that like maybe we take for granted as being like, I can't say Wednesday. You know, Woden didn't exist, so like Wednesday doesn't exist. You know, so like all this stuff that we've just named that we kind of in our colloquial vocabulary take for granted doesn't exist in these worlds. That's the hardest part, is trying to make sure you don't write around that. I remember once again in the Rothfuss thing, using the word pilgrimage and then being like, do pilgrims exist? And which actually came first? Did the word pilgrimage create the pilgrim, or did pilgrims create pilgrimage? And then I'm like, so can I even use this word when I'm writing? And I ended up just removing that verse and writing a different one because I didn't want to use that to answer that question. So I think that is the stuff that is the hardest part, is trying to make sure I catch the details so I don't break something, or at least like something, because people will listen to these a million times, and I don't want you to get a question, James, about like, well, this says this and the song says something different, and your answer to be, it was a mistake. You know, I don't necessarily mind making mistakes, but like I'd prefer if they were just like few and far between, you know. I don't know. I think that's the hardest part, is trying to make sure you're staying true to the world in all the little details that you might not think about.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if that was answered. I'm just going through. We're probably going to be wrapping up soon because we've gone a pretty long while.
Yeah, of course.
I want to make sure that we got to all the cool questions that I saw earlier. I mean, this is just going to be an opportunity for us to praise Casey, so we should do that. How do you pick the piece of music that gets edited into specific scenes? Does Casey pick them out, or do you, James, have any influence? The answer is, that's all Casey, baby. Casey uses these songs and uses them so effectively.
Casey has repeatedly, I've gotten messages on people saying they liked a new song I wrote that I did not write, that Casey pieced together out of the instruments that I gave him to use.
Yeah.
And people were like, this song sounds great. I'm like, didn't write it. Technically a Casey creation. I'll take credit, but it's definitely not mine.
Casey sampled my work, but I think
Yes.
we know.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, it's technically using instruments that I gave him. And so he wouldn't have made it without me, but I did not make it. Yeah.
I will say, like, as from a production perspective, I am going to Arnie with needs that are created by moments in the show. Like Lighthouse. Lighthouse was a song that Arnie was working on, but I went to Arnie and was like, I need a romance theme. And Arnie's like, I got it. It's Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And I went to Casey then. I was like, hey, Arnie's got this new theme. It is the romance theme that we're going to be using on the show. Make sure that it shows up in this scene. But everything after that first appearance of the theme was Casey using that tool that we had created. So if you go, gosh, that was a brilliant moment, the way that song hit, that's all Casey, baby. Can't take credit for any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's all him.
Okay. I think that we kind of answered that in a couple different ways. The album holds a wide variety of topics in its shanties: love songs, laments, cautionary tales. Is there any particular niche that you'd like to see filled in the future?
You know, I didn't set out when I wrote it to fill any of those niches. They all just happened, based on what I thought was appropriate. I can tell you there is a song, my favorite genre of music is not in here yet, and I suspect it will make an appearance at some point. But my favorite genre that exists in all genres, but is actually fairly prevalent in folk and even in country, is usually the lover spurned revenge song. Is my favorite, and I like it when it's a woman absolutely fucking giving it to a man. I love it when a woman has been wronged in some way that is usually exactly how a man would wrong a woman, and she gets a revenge in a way that is what may seem brutal and improportionate, but in my brain, exactly appropriate. Like, what's the classic, the country tune, the I dug my key into the side of this. Like, that's like one of the perfect song. Like everything Kesha writes, like just there's so much stuff where it's like, all right, a man has done something wrong and it's time for a woman to get in there and absolutely fuck his shit up. That genre hasn't been written by me yet in this particular setting, and it will arrive. That's, I guarantee you, without fail, there will be a song about someone, most likely a man, doing something wrong and being destroyed by most likely a woman, but who knows?
For me, something that I'm very excited about, that I have been talking to Arnie about almost every opportunity that we get together. I need a montage song. I need a workout montage song.
That's right. We do need that. All right.
So that is happening. That is going to happen. I want a fucking folk tune that you can pump iron to and get those gains, baby.
Well, I have been so it's funny. I've been running lately and just trying to be in better shape, and I've been listening to a lot of music that like I never listened to because it's like running music, like music where you're like, it's got a great beat and you're supposed to just like be working out to it. And now I'm kind of like obsessed with this genre, and I have like been wanting to write like, what's a workout montage tune? So I've been working on one for like Our World, but I'm happy to work on one in Sphere as well. That would be so fun.
Yeah. It's got to happen. It's like a necessary component. And I just love the idea of the classic jock jam workout music,
Yeah.
like the fucking Eye of the Tiger for Sphere.
Dun, 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 dun.
I
Yeah.
just love the idea of like a weird fantasy folk, like people being like,
Yeah.
no, we really need something to kick ass to.
Yeah. Yeah. What is this? Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I'll do that. Yeah. I'll do that for sure.
For quick cleanup, there was a question about weaving music and magic in Sphere. Yeah, obviously, there's
Yeah.
some magical musical traditions. I write a little bit more. I wrote a little bit more about musical traditions for the upcoming lyric book. That will probably be out closer to when we originally planned the album to be out. But like, look forward to learning more about that. I don't want to spoil it because it's something that people backed on Kickstarter supported to happen. So we'll just have to wait for that one. Do we realize how truly visceral a reaction you evoked in so many listeners with the musical sting at the end of the last episode? Yeah, baby. That's art, folks. That's how it works. I will tell you, Arnie gave me a new musical sting to end the next episode with. So you're gonna get to enjoy that. I'm very excited for all of you. I hope it has an equally visceral but different reaction for all of you. Finally, reframing my question from the Kickstarter earlier, this Arnie Tyler collab, will it feature one of the new music styles you mentioned earlier? I don't want to paint them into a corner. We're gonna figure out what that will be. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Yeah. How many revenge songs are about Travis specifically? Interesting question. I don't think Travis is somebody who has pissed off a lot of lovers because he kind of mentioned that after he lost his wife, he really didn't get into many romantic relationships. There are definitely songs about people who are angry at Travis. We might find more songs about Oromar like that. So I want to end this stream, though, with a question that comes to us from our good friend, Johnny O'Mara. Who is Arnie's favorite Skyjacks character?
Oh, man. Johnny O'Mara really throwing me under the bus here. So keeping in mind that I've listened to 20 episodes,
Yep.
I really like JPC's character, and I'm really excited to hear what happens with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, so good.
It pays off in a big way. I think.
I'm really excited to hear from him again. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone loved Ref, but that's it. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us and all of your wonderful questions. Thanks again sincerely to everyone who helped us make this album. This album is something that Arnie and I have talked about, or maybe I more seriously than Arnie at the beginning have talked about basically since the beginning of the show.
Yeah, you were like, we can make an album. And I'm like, I know what that's like. We're not making an album. Like, I've been told I'm making an album for years. So when someone says we're making an album, I'm like, that's not what's happening. And then eventually we're having the meeting about the album. And I'm like, what album? Oh, you mean my music? I don't know about that.
The one that I accidentally made?
No, I have enough tracks for an album. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This was really, I just put money was like a little carrot inside of a box with a little stick, and I pulled the string away as soon as Arnie went to nibble at that carrot. But again, thank you everybody for making this album possible. I can't say how excited I am about it because you've opened up so many opportunities for us to, create new and wonderful art. And hey, there was a pandemic this year, and I'm so glad that we were able to get Arnie paid because
I can't even the money aspect. I can't stress enough. I wish I could thank every single. I mean, I probably will thank every single person individually, but it's what a year to have this happen. Like, literally saves me from. In July, I was like, maybe I literally move away, and then other stuff happened, and it all came through. But it was, it was really close. And I'm not the only person there. And I sympathize and understand with everyone's lives changing drastically. But it's important. I hope everyone knows that this has made an enormous difference for me. So.
All right. Well, we are gonna stop the stream now. Again, thanks for hanging out. Remember, there are no kings. Take flight.